The silk tie felt like a noose around my throat as I stepped into my own mansion and found a child whispering to my dead mother's portrait. "The bad man with the red tie is going to hurt everyone," she said, her small hands pressed flat against the wall. "You have to tell the scary boss man." I should have been furious that a servant's daughter was wandering my halls at midnight. Instead, I froze. "Who is the bad man?" My voice came out rougher than intended. The little girl whirled around, her brown eyes wide with terror. For a moment, I saw myself reflected in them, the monster I'd become. I expected her to scream. Instead, she ran toward me, grabbing the leg of my $1,000 trousers. "Please, sir, you have to listen. The man with the red tie comes when you're gone. He makes Mama cry. He says he's going to take everything, and then we're all going to die, and you won't even know because you'll be dead too." Kneeling was difficult, my body still recovering from the bullet I'd taken in Moscow 2 months ago. But I knelt, bringing myself to her level. Up close, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the tremble in her small shoulders. "Slow down, Pequeña. Tell me what the man looks like. When does he come?" "He has gray hair and always wears his red tie. He comes when Mama thinks I'm sleeping. He says I'm an accident, and he'll make me go away like he made the other one go away." My blood turned to ice. Gray hair, red tie, the other one. Marco Vincenzo, my underboss of 10 years. The man who'd stood beside me through the war with the Russians, who'd taken a knife meant for my back. The man who always wore a burgundy Hermes tie, a gift from his dead wife. What other one? Sophia, the lady. The pretty lady who lived in the yellow room. He said she tried to leave, and now she's sleeping in the garden. My mother's portrait seemed to stare down at us. The yellow room had been hers. She died 2 years ago in a car accident, or so I'd been told. A hit and run. Marco had handled everything, had been so supportive, so caring. I hadn't even questioned it. "Where is your mother now?" "She's with the other ladies. The ones who make the food and clean the rooms. They're all in the basement. The bad man said they'd be punished if they told you." "How many men?" "7. The bad man and the mean ones with the black clothes. They have guns, and they have a box that goes beep. The box is with the bad man, and he's going to use it when you come home. A bomb. They'd wired the mansion with explosives. Marco wasn't just planning a coup. He was planning to erase me from existence. Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Mama said the bad men would hurt us if we told." "But you're scarier than the bad men." "Mama always said you're the scariest man in the world, but you're also the safest." Like a thunderstorm, I let out a short, bitter laugh. A 4-year-old girl had more sense than my entire security detail. "Listen to me carefully, Sophia. I need you to stay here. Hide behind the portrait, and don't come out until I come get you. Do you understand?" She nodded, her small face pale but determined. "I'll be the thunderstorm. And I'll make sure no one ever hurts you or your mama again." The portrait of my mother swung open on silent hinges, revealing the passageway I'd had built during the Cold War renovations. My grandfather had been a paranoid man, and paranoia had made us rulers of New York's underworld for 3 generations. Tonight, I thanked his ghost for the foresight that the tunnel was cramped, lit only by emergency strips that glowed a dull orange. I moved through it like the predator I'd been trained to be, my hands already working the custom pistol holster at my lower back. The Beretta was a gift from a Sicilian don who owed me his life. 15 rounds, whisper quiet suppressor, enough stopping power to punch through body armor. The tunnel opened into the wine cellar's viewing room, a glass-walled chamber where I'd entertained dignitaries and intimidated rivals. Through the glass, I saw the basement proper. Marco stood at the center of the room, his back to me, his burgundy tie visible even in the dim light. Around him, 6 men in tactical gear, mercenaries, not my men. Their postures were relaxed, arrogant. They thought I was still in Switzerland. The maids were huddled against the far wall, their faces masks of terror. Maria was in front of them, her arms spread wide as if she could physically shield the other women from the armed men. I could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else, fury. "Let me guess," Marco was saying, his voice carrying through the glass. "You're all praying he'll come back early and save you. Is that it? You think he cares about a bunch of maids? Me, Jeef cares about loyalty." Maria spat. "And he knows I've been loyal. He'll kill you for this, Marco. He'll make it slow." "Loyalty." Marco laughed. "Your Jeef killed my wife. Did you know that he had her murdered because she was going to leave him? He made it look like an accident. But I know. My mother." He was talking about my mother. The rage that flooded through me was cold, crystalline, absolute. But it was also clarifying. Marco had been planning this for years, building his case against me with lies and manipulation. "You're insane," Maria said. "He loved his mother. You're the one who—" "Shut your mouth." Marco snapped. "You think you know him? You've been here 3 years. I've been here 15. I know every dark corner of his soul. I know about the men he's killed, the families he's destroyed. And now I'm going to do the world a favor," and the glass shattered as I kicked through it, shards raining down like diamonds. I was midair before Marco even turned, my Beretta already tracking the nearest mercenary. 2 shots, center mass. The man dropped without a sound that the chaos was deafening. Men shouting, women screaming, the staccato pop of suppressed gunfire. But I was in my element, the thunderstorm in human form. I moved through the room like water, my shots precise, economical that one of the mercenaries raised his weapon toward the maids, and I put a round through his kneecap. He went down screaming, and I put another round through his shoulder for good measure. "Anyone else want to try?" I snarled, my voice cutting through the pandemonium. The remaining 3 mercenaries dropped their weapons, their hands in the air. Smart men. They'd taken jobs against me without understanding who they were dealing with. I glanced at the body count. For dead, 3 captured, and Marco standing frozen by the wine rack, his face a mask of disbelief. "Hello, old friend." My voice was conversational. "How was Geneva? You were supposed to be dead." "Yes, I gathered that." "The beeping box you've got in your pocket. How much C4 are we talking?" Marco's hand crept toward his jacket, and I fired a shot that creased his ear, sending a bloom of crimson across his gray-haired, None of that. Let's see the trigger." He pulled it out with shaking hands, a small detonator with a red button. Standard wireless setup, probably one of the Russian models making the rounds. Impressive. "How many charges?" "Enough to level this house and half the estate." Marco's voice trembled. "You can't stop it. Even if you kill me, I've got men stationed all over the property." You had men stationed all over the property. 20 minutes ago, my chief of security intercepted 7 packages that didn't belong. You know, it's funny. I fired him this morning for negligence. He didn't take it well, but he still did his job." Marco's face went pale. "You can't have known. I was so careful." "You were careless. You let a 4-year-old girl see you. A child figured out what my entire security apparatus missed. That's pathetic, Marco. Almost as pathetic as killing a woman who was like a mother to me. She was going to leave you." Marco spat. "She told me herself. She said you were becoming a monster, and she couldn't bear to watch anymore. I did you a favor." Her death was a favor. I stalked toward him, my finger resting on the trigger. "You murdered my mother to control me. You wanted me to be weak, dependent on you. But it didn't work, did it? I got harder, meaner, more efficient. You were already a monster. I just helped you become the monster you were meant to be. What I am is the man who's going to take everything from you. And I'm going to let you watch while I do it." The basement was beginning to smell like blood and fear, a combination I'd grown used to over the years. But tonight the metallic tang had a different edge to it, sweet, almost like the satisfaction of a long-awaited meal that I made the surviving mercenaries kneel in a line, their hands bound with zip ties I'd taken from their own equipment. Marco I left standing, watching, while I made calls on my encrypted phone. The first call was to my CFO, a timid man who'd never suspected his boss was the head of the most powerful crime syndicate on the East Coast. I didn't ask about Marco's accounts. I told him what to do. Everything. Every account, every property, every shell company. I want it all transferred to my private holdings by dawn. And Henry, if I find out Marco has so much as $1 left by morning, I'll own your grandchildren. The second call was to my fixer, a man who specialized in making problems disappear. I've got 4 bodies and 3 witnesses. The bodies need to vanish. The witnesses need to understand they were never here. The third call was to the woman I'd been courting for 6 months, Catherine, a senator's daughter with ambitions that matched my own. She'd been Marco's liaison, I realized now. She'd fed him information, played the dutiful girlfriend while she planned my downfall. "Hello, darling. I'm coming to dinner." She was smart enough to hesitate. "Victor, it's almost midnight." "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I just wanted to see you. I'll be there in 40 minutes. I hung up before she could object, then turned to Marco. "Your girlfriend was a nice touch. Sending her to me, having her play the role of the perfect paramour. Did you think I wouldn't notice her slipping out of my bed to report to you? Marco's expression shifted from defiance to confusion. I don't know what you're. The guest bathroom. That's where she made her calls. She thought I was asleep, but I'm a light sleeper. Old habits. And the interesting thing is, she made sure to plant a bug in my bedroom, right behind the headboard. I found it 3 months ago, and let her keep playing her game. If possible, Marco's face went even paler. You knew. All this time you knew. I knew. But I didn't know your full play until tonight. See, I needed to understand who else was involved. Was it just the two of you, or was there a larger conspiracy? Marco had been sputtering for excuses, but his face became still at the second question. A glimmer of real fear flickered in his eyes. Who else? I pressed the barrel of my Beretta against his temple. Give me names, and I might let you keep your eyes. There are more players. People who think you're too powerful. Too unpredictable. They want to. The sound of a shot didn't register as loud in the confined space. But a woman's scream sliced through the air, making my blood run cold. I spun around, gun raised, ready for a new swarm of mercenaries. But what I found was far more chilling. One of my own men, a trusted lieutenant named Frank, standing at the edge of the room with his gun aimed at the maids. Let Marco go, boss. Frank's voice was steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. We've got a new deal. It's not personal. It's just business. Frank. My voice was deceptively calm, masking the storm of betrayal that surged inside me. I gave you your start. I pulled you out of a gutter when you were 17, too drunk to see straight, and made you a man of means. Why? Because you swore loyalty to me. And I've been loyal for 12 years. But you're not the same man you used to be, Victor. You're growing sloppy, letting emotions guide you. You've become a liability. Because I let a few innocent people live, I laughed, a cold sound that made even Frank flinch. Because I haven't executed the entire household staff. Because you're making enemies. We can't afford enemies like the ones you've been making. And the deal I was offered, the money, is too good to ignore. Money. I sneered. You're betraying me for money. You know how many men have died for my fortune, how many graves are filled with people who thought they could get rich by double-crossing me, and you think you're different. Frank's resolve wavered. I don't. Look, it's not just the money. It's the security, the power. We're allied with the Chinese cartel. They're making huge moves on the West Coast, and they need the East Coast operations to be cleared. I'm just part of the play. The Chinese cartel, the words hit me like a physical blow. We'd maintained an uneasy ceasefire with the triads for years, a mutual acknowledgement that open war would destroy both our organizations. To think they were now conspiring with my own men, it was a breach of the highest order. They've already got a foothold in the shipping ports. They've been siphoning off your trade for months, funding your rivals. You're not the only game in town anymore, Victor. The world has moved on, and you're standing in the way of progress. I refused to show the flicker of insecurity that stirred within me. Instead, I stared at Frank, my gaze piercing through his thick skull. You're going to regret this. I might. But tonight, you're going to regret not seeing it coming. Before he could raise his gun fully, I used the moment to pivot, firing a shot that ricocheted off the metal railing behind Frank's head. The sound echoed, and his aim went wide. I used the confusion to dislodge a smoke grenade from my pocket, releasing a thick plume of gray mist that filled the basement. The maids screamed again, their cries muffled by the spreading chaos. Through the haze, I saw Frank stumble backward, his eyes streaming with tears from the acrid smoke. The mercenaries, too bound to run, were coughing and falling over each other. I moved through the smoke like a specter, quickly and deliberately, weaving through the panicked bodies until I emerged on the other side. Frank was about to shoot again when I slammed the butt of my pistol against his temple. He crumpled to the ground like a discarded doll, and I secured his hands with another zip tie. 2 threats neutralized. But in my gut, I knew this was only the beginning. The Chinese cartel's involvement signaled something far larger than mere greed. This was a restructuring of the underworld, and I was the key piece they wanted to remove that the smoke cleared, and I stood over Frank's unconscious body, breathing heavily. In the corner, Maria was already on her feet, herding the remaining maids into a semblance of safety. Her face was pale but composed. He's still moving, one of the maids said, gesturing at Marco. I think he's trying to call someone. I strode over to Marco, who had been doubled over during the chaos, his hands clutching something in his pocket. I grabbed his arm and yanked it free, revealing a second phone, its screen illuminated with a partial message. Even now, you can't help yourself. Can you texting for backup? Disloyal to the very end. Marco's face was a mask of terror. Please, Victor. Don't. I have a family. My son. He doesn't know anything about this. Your son. The boy who's been sailing through prep school on my dime. Enjoying the fruits of your betrayal. Do you think he'll thank you when he learns you were the one who brought this all down? Please. I'll tell you everything. I know about the Chinese cartel's plans. I know who ordered the attack on your mother's life. I even know about the senator's daughter and her real role in your inner circle. I'll give you all of it. Just spare my son. For a long moment, I stared down at him. This man I'd trusted for over a decade, who had been my second in command and closest confidant. And yet, he had planned my death, consorted with my enemies, and murdered my mother. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me every shred of information you have, including the locations of your hidden assets, your contacts in the cartel, and the names of everyone involved in this conspiracy. In exchange, I'll see to it that your son receives a proper education and a comfortable life in a place where people won't learn about his father's misdeeds. Marco nodded frantically. But if I find out you've been lying, your son will die in a way that makes your mother's death look like mercy. Do we understand each other? Marco nodded again, his face streaming with tears. That I walked over to Maria, reaching a hand to her shoulder. Her face was tear-streaked and exhausted, but she held my gaze with a determined tilt of her chin. You saved my life. You and Sophia both. I don't know how to thank you for that. It was not just us. It was your mother's spirit watching over you, even now. She always said you would be a great man. I never told you, but she knew the darkness in your heart, and she knew the light too. I swallowed hard. Tell me about the Chinese cartel. What do they want? Specifically, Maria shook her head. I don't know all the details. But Marco mentioned a meeting in the city tomorrow night. He said it was a watershed moment, that everything would change. I felt a chill race down my spine. A meeting? Where? At your office. The penthouse. They want to stage it as a takeover, I think. Publicly humiliate you in front of your own people. It was audacious, but also brilliant. The top floor of my own headquarters was where I held my most sensitive meetings. No one would think to question the unusual gathering there. I needed to act quickly to turn this betrayal back on the cartel and their local allies. The night wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Leaving the basement in the capable hands of my security chief's replacement, I made my way back up through the tunnel system. The same passages that had hidden me just hours ago. Now they would become the conduit for a different kind of attack. I had a secure communications room in the East Wing, hidden behind another of my mother's portraits. Inside, I made a flurry of calls to trusted allies, men who hadn't been part of Marco's conspiracy. The list was shorter than I'd hoped. Betrayal had a way of pruning the faithful, but it was enough. By dawn, I had a plan. A bloody, beautiful plan that would make the Chinese cartel regret ever looking at my empire. The first move was the most obvious. I called Catherine, my senator's daughter paramour. She answered on the first ring, her voice laced with the performative concern I'd grown tired of pretending to believe. Victor, thank God. I was so worried about you. You said you were coming to dinner, and then you never showed up. Duty called, but I'm free tonight. In fact, I was thinking we could go to that little place you like, the one overlooking the harbor. A pause. I could almost hear her weighing the offer against her allegiances. I'd love to, but I'm afraid I have a prior engagement. Some charity event my father's hosting. I know you hate those things. Ah, yes, the senator's famous charity galas. Maybe next time. Definitely next time. There was an almost microscopic relaxation in her voice, a relief that I'd accepted her excuse so easily. I'll make it up to you. After I hung up, I stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Catherine was a weakness, one I'd allowed to develop despite my better judgment. But she was also a link, a key piece in the puzzle of who was moving against me. I'd keep her close for now, close enough to watch. The next move was more delicate. I needed to create the illusion that I was retreating, that Marco's coup had been partially successful. I called my public affairs manager and fabricated a story about health concerns, a leave of absence from the company's day-to-day operations. It was a lie, but a believable one. The news would spread quickly, and that would buy me the time I needed. By late afternoon, I had my war room set up in a vacant penthouse owned by a shell company. Untraceable, soundproofed, and equipped with multiple layers of security. Around me gathered the core of my remaining loyalists. My head of security's second-in-command, a man with the eyes of a wolf, my accountant, a shy genius with a gift for financial warfare, and a woman who was the most dangerous assassin on the East Coast. The Chinese cartel is going to strike tomorrow night. They think I'm weak, distracted by Marco's betrayal. They think I'm going to show up to the meeting at my own office and walk into their trap. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Boss, are you insane? The assassin asked, her voice dripping with concern. The entire building will be crawling with their operatives. You'll walk into a slaughter, which is exactly what they'll think. But I'm not going in alone. And I'm not going in blind. We've still got eyes inside the building, loyalists who haven't been turned. They'll be our advanced scouts, feeding us information in real time. The accountant cleared his throat. What about Catherine? She's meeting with the cartel's local contact tonight, a man named Zhang. Our surveillance shows they've been close for months. Then we give them a surprise. Seal off the building early. Block all entrances except the main lobby. Flood the place with our own operatives, disguised as regular security guards. When they try to spring their trap, they'll find themselves trapped. I spent the next few hours walking through the specifics, assigning roles and contingencies. By the time the evening sun dipped below the skyline, I had a plan that was as ruthless as it was intricate. And through it all, I kept thinking about Sophia, the little girl who'd warned me in my own home. She'd saved my life. And as I looked at the schematics of my own building, I knew I was going to make sure no one ever scared her again. That the following night, I stood in the shadows of my office's service corridor, watching the penthouse through a one-way mirror. The room was arranged exactly as I'd left it. My desk in the center, the panoramic windows overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline. Everything appeared normal, except for the armed men positioned at key vantage points. The Chinese cartel's local representative, a man named Zhang, was already seated across from my desk, accompanied by two of his lieutenants. In the corner, Catherine stood with a smirk of barely concealed triumph, her elegant black dress a stark contrast to the violence about to unfold. "This is too easy," one of the lieutenants muttered in Mandarin. "We expected resistance, but he hasn't even shown up." "Patience," Zhang replied, also in Mandarin. "He'll come. He's too proud to skip a meeting with his supposed allies. And when he does, we'll make a clean example of him." I smiled in the darkness, enjoying the irony. They thought they'd won already, so certain of their superiority, just as Marco had been certain of his. "It's time," I whispered into my earpiece. "Execute." The lights in the penthouse flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Through the one-way mirror, I heard shouts and the scuffling of feet as the cartel operatives scrambled for their weapons. Then the emergency lights kicked in, bathing the room in an eerie red glow, and revealing my own operatives flooding in from every possible entry point. The security doors slammed shut, trapping the cartel members inside. Gunfire erupted, muffled by the soundproofing, but I knew the outcome was inevitable. That I stepped into the room as the last of the cartel's operatives went down, a bullet to the head from my assassin. Zhang was struggling in the grip of two of my men, his face a mask of shock and fury. "This is impossible," he snarled. Did you really think I'd walk into my own building without taking precautions?" "A lesson for you, Mr. Zhang. Never assume your enemy is as stupid as you hope." Catherine was frozen in the corner, her earlier triumph replaced with fear. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but I had no pity left for traitors. "Victor, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I can explain. They made me do it. They threatened my family. That's a common excuse. But I know the truth. You've been playing both sides, Catherine. You fed information to Marco's network, helped them plan their attack, and now you're trying to claim victimhood. It won't work." "I'll do anything," she sobbed. "Anything. Just don't kill me." I stared at her for a long moment, considering the options. She was a liability now, a loose end that would inevitably cause more problems down the line. But she was also connected to a powerful senator, and killing her would bring heat I didn't want. "You're going to leave the city. You're going to go somewhere far away and never speak of anything you've seen or heard. If I so much as hear a whisper of your name again, I'll know what to do with you." Catherine nodded frantically, stumbling toward the door as soon as I released her. She was gone within seconds, leaving me alone with the destruction. Zhang was still being restrained, his face a mixture of fury and disbelief. I walked over to him and crouched down to meet his eyes. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call your superiors and tell them the operation failed. You're going to tell them that the East Coast is off limits, that I have friends in higher places than they can reach. And then you're going to get out of the city and never come back. The triads don't retreat. They'll send more men, more money. They'll burn this entire city to the ground if they have to. Let them try. I've been in this game longer than you've been alive, Zhang. I know how to make people disappear. And if the triads want a war, they'll get one. A bloody, brutal war that will end with their destruction. Zhang was silent, his face dark with defeat. But I could see the wheels turning in his mind, the calculations of a desperate man trying to find a way out. Consider your position. And then consider how much you're willing to lose for a cause that isn't even yours. I had him moved to a secure holding cell in the building's subbasement, alongside the surviving mercenaries from Marco's crew. They'd all be processed, questioned, and then relocated to facilities where they'd never see daylight again. It was a mercy, really. In the old days, I'd have buried them in the desert. The cleanup took hours. Bodies were removed, evidence destroyed, and the building restored to its pristine state. My remaining loyalists worked with a grim efficiency, their professionalism a balm to my frayed nerves. By the time dawn broke over the city, I was alone in my office, staring out at the skyline. The meeting had been a resounding success. The cartel's foothold in the city had been shattered. Marco was in a secure facility, and Catherine was on a plane to the other side of the world. But the cost of the night's events lingered, a weight pressing against my chest that I thought about my mother, her portrait still smiling down at me from my private chambers. She'd always believed I could be more than the monster I'd become. And now, standing in the aftermath of another massacre, I wasn't sure she'd been right. My phone buzzed with a message from my new chief of security. The girl wants to see you. She's been asking about you all night. I felt a strange warmth creep into my chest, a feeling I'd thought I'd lost long ago. I left the penthouse and made my way to the secure wing where I'd stashed Maria and Sophia for the night. The little girl was sitting up in bed when I walked in, her face brightening at my appearance. "Are you okay?" Sophia asked, her small voice steady. "Mama said there was a big fight, but you won." "I did win. Thanks to you. You saved us all, Sophia. I don't know how to thank you." "Can I see the city from your big window? Mama says it's beautiful at night." I smiled, feeling something shift inside me. "Of course you can. We can go right now if you want." I carried her to the window, lifting her up so she could see the sparkling lights of the city below. She gasped in wonder, her small fingers pressed against the glass. "It's like the stars came down. All the pretty lights." "They did. And they'll keep shining as long as you're here." I made a decision in that moment. I'd been head of the empire for so long that I'd forgotten there was life beyond the violence. But this child had reminded me, had given me a glimpse of something worth protecting. "From now on, you and your mother are going to stay with me. You'll have the best education, the best protection, and anything else you could ever want. It's the least I can do for saving my life." Sophia turned to me, her face serious. "You're not a bad man. Are you? Mama says you're a thunderstorm, but I think storms are beautiful." I choked back the emotion rising in my throat. I'm trying to be. I'm trying very hard to be the man you think I am." And in that moment, I meant it. The empire would always be there, the violence and the bloodshed part of my past and future. But I'd found a new purpose, a new reason to keep fighting. That the thunderstorm would protect his own. And this little girl had become the most precious thing in his world. That a month passed, and the news was filled with stories of the cartel's sudden retreat. Their networks on the East Coast had been dismantled, their leaders discredited and relocated to less hostile territory. The other crime families, sensing the shift in power, sent emissaries to pledge loyalty and offer tribute. I accepted their overtures with grace, but I wasn't fooled. Loyalty in this world was a currency that depreciated quickly. I kept my inner circle close and my outer circle closer, watching for any sign of another betrayal. Marco, I learned, had been transferred to a black site in the Caribbean, a facility where he'd spend the rest of his days answering questions about his network and his assets. His son, true to my word, had been placed in a boarding school in Switzerland, far from the reach of his father's enemies. It was the most mercy I'd ever shown a traitor. But the biggest change was in my own household. Maria had become my personal assistant, handling everything from my schedule to my social engagements. Her efficiency was unmatched, her loyalty absolute. And Sophia had become a permanent fixture in my life that I found myself looking forward to her presence, her innocent questions, and unguarded laughter. She called me Tio Victor, and the title filled me with a warmth I'd thought I'd lost forever. To one evening, about 6 weeks after the attack, I was sitting in my private study when Sophia wandered in. She was carrying a crayon drawing, her face alight with pride. Tio Victor, I made this for you. I took the drawing, studying it carefully. It was a crude depiction of a man standing in front of a house, lightning bolts coming from his hands. Above him, a child with pigtails was floating on a cloud. It's you, she said, pointing at the man. And that's me up there. I'm safe because you're keeping me safe. I felt a lump form in my throat. It's beautiful, Pequeña. I'll treasure it forever. Can we have dinner together tonight? She asked. Mama says you're always working, but I miss you. Of course we can, I said, setting the drawing carefully on my desk. I'll have the kitchen make whatever you want. Even pizza, she asked, her eyes wide. Even pizza. That night, I sat at my massive dining table with Maria and Sophia, sharing a meal that felt more like a family dinner than anything I'd experienced in years. Sophia chattered about her day, about the books she was reading and the games she played, while Maria watched with a smile that reached her eyes. You're good with her, Maria said softly, as Sophia ran off to get another drawing. I never expected you to be so gentle. I didn't expect it either, I admitted. But she's changed something in me. I'm not sure I know how to be the man I was before. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Maria said. Maybe the old man needed to change. I nodded, staring at the empty seat where Sophia had been. Maybe you're right. But even as I said the words, I knew the change wasn't complete. There was still a darkness inside me, a capacity for violence that had kept me alive for so long. And I knew that darkness would always be there, waiting to be unleashed. The question was whether I could control it, or whether it would eventually consume everything I'd come to care about. Later that night, after Sophia had gone to bed, I received an unexpected visitor. My head of security, a man named Dmitri who had been with me for only a few months, appeared at my study door with a grim expression. Boss, we've got a problem. A big one. What is it? We've been monitoring the cartel's communications, like you ordered, and we just picked up something concerning. They're planning a retaliatory strike, but it's not aimed at you. I felt my blood run cold. Who is it aimed at? At the girl. Sophia. I was on my feet before he finished the sentence. Where is she now? She's in her room. Maria's with her. We've got extra guards on the floor, but boss, this is a serious threat. They're planning to hit her at school. They've already got people in place. My mind raced through the possibilities. Sophia's school was a small private institution, well-regarded but not heavily fortified. It would be easy for a determined enemy to breach its defenses. I want her pulled out of that school tomorrow, I said. She's not going back. And I want everyone who was involved in the planning of this attack found and eliminated. I don't care how long it takes. Dmitri nodded. What about Maria? She's going to have questions. I'll handle Maria. You focus on the threat. After Dmitri left, I sat alone in my study, staring at Sophia's drawing. The image of the thunderstorm man, protecting the little girl on the cloud, seemed to mock me now. I'd promised her safety, and already the world had found a way to threaten that promise. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let that happen. I spent the rest of the night making calls, activating contacts I'd kept in reserve for emergencies. By dawn, I had a plan to neutralize the cartel's retaliatory strike and ensure Sophia's safety. But the cost would be high, higher than anything I'd paid before. I walked to Sophia's room as the sun rose, peering through the crack in the door. She was still asleep, her small face peaceful in the morning light. Maria was dozing in a chair beside her bed, her hand resting on Sophia's blanket. I watched them for a long moment, feeling the weight of the decision I'd made. I was about to go to war with the Chinese cartel, to tear their empire apart piece by piece until they had no resources left to threaten anyone I cared about. It would be bloody. It would be brutal. And it would likely cost me more than I was willing to pay. But as I looked at Sophia, I knew I had no choice. The thunderstorm was coming. And this time, there would be no mercy. The war room was a converted panic room in the sub-basement of my private estate, reinforced with enough steel and concrete to survive a direct missile strike. I'd had it built during the height of the Russian conflict, and it had served me well. Now it would serve me again. Dmitri was already there when I arrived. his face illuminated by the glow of multiple monitors. Surrounding him were my key operatives, the assassin, my financial warfare specialist, and a new addition, a former intelligence officer who'd been burned by his own government and had found a profitable home in my organization. The cartel's retaliatory strike is codenamed Operation Serpent's Bite, Dmitri began, pulling up a series of documents on the main screen. It's a three-pronged attack. First, they're going to hit Sophia's school during the morning drop-off. Second, they're planning to strike this estate directly, using a coordinated assault from multiple angles. And third, they've got assets in place to disrupt our shipping operations, cutting off our revenue streams and forcing us into a defensive posture. How did they get this information? I asked, my voice cold. We've been careful. We swept for bugs. We've rotated personnel. Someone inside is feeding them. We think it's Catherine, the ex-intelligence officer said. She was in a position to know about the estate's security protocols, and she had access to your personal schedule. We should have cut her loose earlier. Catherine is in Europe, I said. She's under constant surveillance. If she so much as sneezes in the wrong direction, I'll know about it. This is someone else. Or multiple someones, the assassin offered. We've had a lot of personnel turnover since the Marco incident. It's possible we missed a sleeper or two. I nodded, absorbing the information. Then we flush them out. We give them false information about our defensive plans, and we watch who reacts. But first, we secure Sophia. I turn to Dmitri. I want her moved to a safe house tonight. Somewhere off the grid, with a small, trusted team. Maria goes with her. What about you, boss? You're the primary target. I know. That's why I'm going to be very visible over the next few days. I'll attend public events, make appearances at the office. I'll be the bait that draws their attention away from Sophia. And when they bite, the assassin asked, a predatory glint in her eye. Then we make them regret it. The plan was set in motion that evening. Sophia was confused and scared when I woke her from a deep sleep, her small face crumpling with tears as I explained she had to leave. Are you sending me away, Tio Victor? She asked, her voice trembling. No, Pequeña. I'm keeping you safe. There are bad people who want to hurt me, and they might try to hurt you too. I can't let that happen. So you're going to go to a special place with your mama, and I'm going to come get you as soon as it's safe. But I want to stay with you. Her words cut deeper than any knife ever could. I knelt beside her bed, pulling her into a gentle hug. I want you to stay too, but I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that? She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I can be brave. Like you. That's my girl. I kissed the top of her head. I'll see you soon. I promise. Maria was waiting by the door, her face a mask of controlled anxiety. She'd already packed a small bag, clearly prepared for this contingency to keep her safe. I said, my voice low. If anything happens to her, nothing will happen to her. Maria interrupted, her voice fierce. I'd die before I let anyone hurt my daughter. I know you would. That's why I trust you with her. They left through a secret tunnel that led to an underground garage, where a black SUV was waiting. Dmitri had personally vetted the driver and the security detail for men who'd been with me for years and had proven their loyalty through fire and blood. I watched the SUV disappear into the night, feeling a cold emptiness settle in my chest. The estate felt hollow without Sophia's laughter echoing through the halls, but I couldn't afford sentimentality. There was work to be done. Over the next 48 hours, I executed the first phase of my counterstrike. I made public appearances at a charity gala, a business luncheon, and a meeting with city officials. Each appearance was carefully stage-managed to project confidence and normalcy, even as my network worked behind the scenes to unravel the cartel's plans. The ex-intelligence officer, a man named Miles who had a gift for reading people, identified 3 potential moles within my organization. 2 were low-level staffers who'd been turned by promises of money and power. The third was more troubling, a mid-level manager in my shipping division who'd been feeding information to the cartel for months. I confronted the manager personally, in a warehouse on the waterfront. The man, his name was O'Malley, was already shaking when I walked in, flanked by 2 of my most intimidating enforcers. You know why you're here, I said, my voice flat. I can explain. They threatened my family. My wife, my kids. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You chose to betray me. You chose to put my people at risk. And now you're going to face the consequences. Please, O'Malley begged, falling to his knees. I'll do anything. I'll tell you everything I know about their operations. Just don't hurt my family." I studied him for a long moment. He was a weak man, easily manipulated, and not truly loyal to the cartel. He was useful. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to continue feeding information to the cartel. But the information will come from me. You'll tell them what I want them to know, and you'll do it without hesitation. If you try to warn them, or if you give them anything that puts my people at risk, I'll make sure you watch your family die before I let you follow them." O'Malley nodded frantically. Yes, yes. I'll do whatever you want. I swear it." "You swear it," I repeated, a cold smile spreading across my face. "Good, because I'm going to hold you to that." I had O'Malley released and returned to his post, under close surveillance. He was now my unwitting ally, a double agent who would feed the cartel the false information I needed them to believe. Meanwhile, my assault teams were preparing for the second phase of the plan. Using the intelligence I'd gathered from Marco and my other sources, I'd identified the cartel's key operational hubs on the East Coast. There were 6 of them: distribution centers, money laundering fronts, and safe houses. In one night, I planned to hit all 6 simultaneously. The night of the operation, I gathered my team in the war room. The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. "Tonight, we send a message," I said, addressing the assembled operatives. "The cartel thinks they can threaten what's mine. They think they can move against me and my people without consequence. Tonight, we prove them wrong." I detailed the targets, the teams, and the extraction points. Each strike was designed to be surgical and devastating, crippling the cartel's infrastructure without causing unnecessary collateral damage. "I want them to know who's responsible," I continued. "I want them to see my signature on every single one of these attacks. By sunrise, they'll understand that coming after me was the worst mistake they ever made." The teams moved out at midnight, spreading across the city like a shadow. I stayed in the war room, monitoring their progress through encrypted feeds and live audio. The first strike hit at 12:47 a.m., a distribution center in Brooklyn that served as the cartel's primary hub for narcotics traffic. My team neutralized the guards, seized the inventory, and destroyed the facility's infrastructure. The explosion was visible for miles. The second strike hit at 1:15 a.m., a money laundering front in Queens disguised as a laundromat. My financial warfare specialist was on site, seizing records and freezing accounts. By the time the cartel realized what was happening, millions of dollars had vanished from their reach. The third strike hit at 1:42 a.m., a safe house in the Bronx where the cartel's local leadership was staying. My assassin led the assault personally, and by the time she emerged, 3 of the cartel's top operatives were dead. The remaining strikes followed in rapid succession, each one more devastating than the last. By 4 a.m., all 6 targets had been hit, and my teams were pulling back to their extraction points. I sat in the war room, watching the aftermath unfold on the screens. The cartel's East Coast operations were in ruins. They'd lost millions in assets, key personnel, and infrastructure. It would take them months to recover, if they ever could. But I knew this wasn't over. The cartel would retaliate. They'd come at me with everything they had, and the real war was only beginning. The sun was rising when my teams began reporting in. Casualties were minimal, a few minor injuries, no fatalities. It was a clean sweep, the kind of operation that would be studied and celebrated in the underworld for years to come. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Then I turned my attention to the next phase of the plan. The cartel's leadership was based in California, a sprawling network of operations that had been untouchable for years. But I had resources they didn't know about, connections in the West Coast underworld, allies who'd been waiting for the right moment to strike. I made a call to an old contact in Los Angeles, a man named Reyes who controlled the city's southern districts. He was a ruthless operator, and he owed me a favor from a deal we'd made years ago. "Victor," Reyes said, his voice crackling through the encrypted line. "I was wondering when you'd call. Heard you've been busy on the East Coast." Busy is an understatement. I've just dismantled the cartel's operations in New York. But their leadership is still intact, and they're going to retaliate. I figured as much. What do you need from me? I need you to put pressure on their West Coast operations. Cut off their supply lines, disrupt their distribution. I need you to make them think the attack is coming from the inside. Reyes was silent for a moment. That's a big ask. If they find out I'm involved, they won't find out. I've got a double agent in place who's going to feed them misinformation. They'll think the attacks are coming from a rival faction, not from you. And in the meantime, I'll be hitting them from the east. And what's in it for me? Besides my gratitude, I'll give you first access to their West Coast assets once we're done. You'll control the distribution routes from San Diego to Seattle. That's a lot of territory, Reyes. Enough to make you the most powerful man on the coast. I could almost hear Reyes's greed overriding his caution. All right, Victor, you've got a deal. But this better work. It will, I said. It has to. I spent the next several hours coordinating the West Coast operation, feeding information to O'Malley to pass on to the cartel. By the time I was done, I'd laid the groundwork for a campaign that would tear the cartel apart from both sides. But as I sat alone in the war room, staring at the maps and reports, I felt a gnawing sense of unease. Everything was going according to plan, too smoothly, too perfectly. In my experience, that usually meant something was about to go wrong. I was proven right an hour later, when one of my intelligence analysts burst into the room with a panicked expression. Boss, we've got a problem. We just picked up chatter about a secondary attack. They're not just hitting the estate and the school. They're going after Maria's family in the Dominican Republic. I felt the blood drain from my face. Maria's family, her parents, her siblings, her young nieces and nephews. The cartel was planning to use them as leverage to force Maria to turn against me. How soon? Within the next 24 hours. They've already got people in place. I was on my feet in an instant. I need a plane. Now. And I need a team ready to move within the hour. Boss, are you sure this could be a trap? They could be expecting you to. I don't care. My voice was ice. Maria saved my life. Her daughter saved my life. I'm not going to let their family die because of me. I moved through the estate like a man possessed, gathering my team and preparing for an operation that was as personal as it was dangerous. The plane was ready within 40 minutes, and I was airborne before the sun had fully risen over the city. As I stared out the window at the clouds below, I thought about Sophia, about her small hand in mine, her laughter echoing through the halls. I thought about Maria, her fierce loyalty and unwavering courage. And I thought about the family I'd never had, the warmth I'd only just begun to discover. I would protect them, whatever it took. The thunderstorm was coming, and this time, there would be no mercy. The Gulf Stream cut through the clouds at 40,000 feet, its engines a steady hum that did nothing to calm the rage simmering beneath my skin. I'd brought a skeleton crew, Dimitri, the assassin whose name I still didn't know, and 4 of my most trusted enforcers. The rest of my team was on standby, ready to mobilize the moment we had actionable intelligence. Miles was already on the ground in Santo Domingo, coordinating with local assets I'd cultivated over the years. The Dominican Republic was a key transit point for narcotics moving into the United States, and I'd made sure to have friends in every port. Now those friends would earn their keep. I spent the flight studying the intelligence Miles had gathered. Maria's family lived in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of the capital, a cluster of houses surrounded by concrete walls and barbed wire. Her father was a retired mechanic, her mother a homemaker. 2 brothers, both working class, and a sister who'd married a local businessman. 3 nieces, 2 nephews. 11 people in total, all of them vulnerable. The cartel had already inserted a team of 6 operatives into the area. They were posing as tourists, but their movements had been tracked by my local assets. They were waiting for the right moment to strike. We'll hit them before they hit the family, I said to Dimitri as the plane began its descent. I want a surgical strike. No collateral damage, no innocent casualties. We take the cartel's team alive if possible, dead if necessary. The priority is securing the family. Understood, boss. What about extraction? I've got a safe house in the countryside, about an hour from the capital. We'll move the family there and keep them under protection until the threat is neutralized. And Maria, does she know? I shook my head. Not yet. I'll tell her when it's done. She doesn't need to worry about something she can't control. The plane touched down at a private airstrip on the outskirts of Santo Domingo, where a pair of black SUVs were waiting. The local assets, a man named Garcia who ran security for a prominent shipping magnate, met us with a grim expression. We've got eyes on the cartel team, he said. They're staying at a hotel near the family's neighborhood. 6 men, heavily armed. They've been running surveillance for the past 2 days. Can we take them at the hotel? Possible, but risky. The hotel is a public space, lots of civilians. We'd have to move quickly and silently, or risk a firefight that would draw attention. I considered the options. We'll split the team. Half of us hit the hotel, the other half secures the family. We move at midnight, when the streets are quiet and the cartel's team is likely to be resting. Garcia nodded, already making calls to coordinate the operation that we spent the next few hours finalizing the details, mapping out the hotel's layout and the family's neighborhood. By the time midnight approached, I had a plan that was as clean as it was brutal. The hotel was a modest establishment, 3 stories tall with a courtyard in the center. The cartel's team had taken rooms on the second floor, adjacent to each other. My team would enter from the roof, using grappling hooks to descend to the second-floor balcony. From there, we'd breach both rooms simultaneously, using flashbangs to disorient the occupants. The family's house was a 15-minute drive away, a small concrete structure surrounded by a high wall. My second team would approach from the rear, using a side gate that Garcia had identified as a weak point. They'd secure the family and evacuate them to the safe house, while the hotel team completed their mission. At 11:45 p.m., we moved out. The night was humid, the air thick with the sounds of crickets and distant traffic. I moved through the shadows like the predator I'd been trained to be, my Beretta in my hand, and my mind focused on the mission. That the hotel's roof was accessible via a fire escape at the rear of the building. I climbed it in silence, my boots finding purchase on the rusted metal. Above me, the sky was a velvet black, the stars obscured by the city's glowed. My team assembled on the roof, checking their equipment and running through the plan one final time. The assassin was positioned at the edge of the roof, her eyes scanning the courtyard below. "Ready when you are, boss," Dmitri whispered. I nodded, gesturing toward the edge. "Go." We descended simultaneously, our ropes silent against the concrete. I landed on the balcony of the first room, my feet barely making a sound. The assassin took the second room, her movements fluid and graceful. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for any sound from within. Silence. Either the occupants were asleep, or they were waiting for me. I signaled Dmitri to breach, then kicked the door open, my Beretta sweeping the room. The room was empty. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled. A half-empty bottle of rum sat on the nightstand. But no occupants, no weapons, no signs of occupation. I heard a shout from the other room, the assassin's voice, cursing. I moved quickly, my gun raised, ready for anything. The second room was empty too. The cartel's team was gone. "Boss," Dmitri said, his voice tight. "I think they knew we were coming." This was a setup. My mind raced through the possibilities. If the cartel's team was gone, they were likely already at the family's house. My second team was in position, but they might not be enough to hold off 6 armed men. "Move to the family's location," I ordered. Now, we raced down the fire escape, abandoning stealth in favor of speed. The SUVs were waiting, engines running, and we tore through the streets of Santo Domingo like a force of nature. The family's neighborhood was quiet when we arrived, the streets deserted. But as we approached the house, I saw the telltale signs of a struggle, a broken gate, a car abandoned in the middle of the road. My second team was already inside, their weapons trained on the cartel's operatives. The family was huddled in the corner, their faces masks of terror. 3 of the cartel's men were on the ground, dead or wounded. The other 3 were in custody, their hands bound and their faces bloody. "What happened?" I demanded, as I entered the house. "We got here just as they were breaking in," the team leader said, his voice grim. "They didn't expect resistance. We took them by surprise." I surveyed the scene, feeling a cold satisfaction. The family was safe. The cartel's team was neutralized. The mission was a success, but as I looked at the faces of Maria's family, her mother crying, her father trying to appear brave, I felt a pang of guilt. They were here because of me. Their lives had been upended because of my war with the cartel. "I'm sorry," I said, addressing the family. "This is my fault. You were targeted because of me. But I promise you, I'll make it right. You're safe now, and I'll make sure no one ever threatens you again." Maria's father looked at me with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "You're the one my daughter works for." "Yes, sir. Victor Marchetti. She talks about you sometimes," the old man said. "She says you're a good man, despite everything." I hope she's right. I swallowed hard. I'm trying to be. We moved the family to the safe house, a sprawling estate in the countryside that was guarded by a small army of my operatives. The children were terrified at first, but they soon settled into the new surroundings, their natural resilience shining through. I stayed for 2 days, making sure the family was comfortable and secure. I spoke to Maria's father at length, learning about their lives and their struggles. They were good people, hardworking and honest, the kind of people I'd spent my life preying on. It was a humbling experience, one that left me questioning everything I'd done. On the 3rd day, I received word that the cartel was planning another attack, this time on the safe house itself. They'd tracked the family's movements and were determined to finish what they'd started. I gathered my team in the safe house's main hall, the walls lined with weapons and tactical gear. The mood was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Here's the situation, I said, addressing the assembled operatives. The cartel knows where we are. They're planning an assault within the next 24 hours. We've got 3 options. We can evacuate the family, which would leave them vulnerable to future attacks. We can hold our ground and fight, which would risk civilian casualties. Or we can go on the offensive, hitting the cartel where they live. I paused, letting the options sink in. I'm choosing the 3rd option. We're going to take the fight to the cartel. We're going to dismantle their operation in the Dominican Republic and send a message that they can't touch anyone under my protection. But boss, Dmitri said, there are only 12 of us. The cartel has 100 men at least in this country. How do we take on those odds? I smiled, a cold, dangerous smile. By being smarter and more ruthless. This is what we do, Dmitri. We don't fight fair. We fight to win. I laid out the plan over the next hour, using every resource at my disposal. The cartel's local headquarters was a fortified compound on the outskirts of the city, defended by dozens of armed men. But I had an asset they didn't know about, a mole within their organization, a disgruntled lieutenant who'd been turned by Garcia's network. The mole would provide us with the compound's layout, the guard rotations, and the location of the cartel's leadership. With that information, we'd launch a coordinated assault that would cripple their operation and send their leaders scrambling. The night of the assault, I gathered my team in the forest surrounding the compound. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the distant sound of traffic. We move in 10 minutes, I said, my voice low. Remember, we're not here to capture. We're here to destroy. Leave no one alive who can come after us. The team nodded, their faces grim. We moved through the forest like ghosts, our movements synchronized and silent. The compound's outer wall was a 10-foot barrier of concrete and barbed wire. But the mole had disabled the electronic surveillance for a 30-second window. We scaled the wall in seconds, dropping into the courtyard with our weapons ready. The guards were taken out silently, 2 quick shots from my Beretta, a knife from the assassin. The sound of our attack drew attention, and soon the compound was alive with shouts and gunfire. But we were ready. We moved through the compound like a force of nature, clearing rooms and corridors with brutal efficiency. The cartel's men were caught off guard, their defenses scattered and chaotic. I found the cartel's local leader in the main building, a man named Ortega who'd been terrorizing the country for years. He was hiding behind a desk, his hands shaking as he held a pistol. Please, he begged. I'll give you anything. Money, information, anything. I don't want your money, I said, my voice cold. I want you to understand that you made a mistake when you threatened my family. Your family, Ortega's face was a mask of confusion. I don't know what you're talking about. The family you were going to use as leverage. Maria's family. You thought you could use them to get to me. Realization dawned on Ortega's face. You're Marchetti, the East Coast Don. I am. And I'm here to make sure you never threaten anyone I care about again. I raised my Beretta and fired that the compound was in ruins by the time we left. 53 cartel operatives dead, their leadership eliminated, their operations dismantled. The news would spread quickly through the underworld, and the message would be clear. The thunderstorm protected his own. As we drove away from the burning compound, I felt a strange sense of peace. The war with the cartel was far from over, but I'd struck a blow that would take them years to recover from. And in the meantime, Maria's family was safe. Back at the safe house, I found Maria's father waiting for me. He'd heard the news about the compound, and his face was a mixture of gratitude and awe. You saved my family, he said. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, I said. Just stay safe. That's all I ask. I will, but I have to ask you something. Of course. Maria says you've changed. She says you're not the same man you were before. Is that true? I thought about Sophia, about her innocent faith in me. I thought about Maria, her loyalty and courage. I thought about the family I'd never had, the warmth I'd only just begun to discover. I'm trying, I said. I'm trying very hard to be the man they think I am. The old man nodded, a small smile on his face. Then you're already on the right path. I left the safe house the next morning, returning to New York to prepare for the next phase of the war. The cartel would retaliate, and I needed to be ready to. But as I looked out the window of the plane, watching the Dominican Republic disappear into the clouds, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. The hope that I could be something more than the monster I'd become. The thunderstorm would protect his own, and this time, he'd do it without losing himself in the process. That the penthouse felt different when I returned. Empty. The kind of silence that pressed against your ears and made you hear things that weren't there. Sophia's laughter was gone. Maria's quiet efficiency in the kitchen was absent. Even the staff moved differently, softer, more careful, as if they were walking through a graveyard. That I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the city below. Manhattan glittered like a jewel box, each light representing a life I could snuff out with a single phone call. That was the power I'd built, the empire I'd sacrificed everything to create. And yet, standing here now, it all felt hollow. The war with the cartel had entered a new phase. My strike in the Dominican Republic had bought me time, but it had also escalated the conflict. The cartel's leadership in California was mobilizing, calling in favors from allies across the continent. I'd received word that they were planning a summit, a gathering of all their major players to coordinate a response. That I saw an opportunity. A dangerous one, but an opportunity nonetheless. Dmitri came into the penthouse, his face grim. We've got confirmation on the summit. It's happening in 3 days at a private estate in the Napa Valley. All the major players will be there, the cartel's top leadership, their financial backers, even a few representatives from other organizations who've sided with them. Security, heavy. At least 50 armed men, plus advanced surveillance systems. The estate is remote, surrounded by open ground. Any approach will be visible. What about infiltration? Can we get someone inside? We've got a contact who's catering the event. One of the kitchen staff is a former associate of ours. She's willing to help, but she's not a combatant. She can get us inside, but once we're there, we're on our own. I considered the options. A direct assault would be suicide. Infiltration was risky, but possible. If we could get a small team inside and hit them before they knew what was happening, we might have a chance. I want a team ready to move within 48 hours, I said. Small, elite. No more than 6 people. We'll infiltrate during the pre-event setup and hit them during the main gathering. Boss, that's insane. Even with 6 people, the odds are stacked against us. I know, but we don't have a choice. If we let this summit happen, the cartel will coordinate a response that we won't be able to stop. We need to strike first, strike hard, and make sure they understand that we'll never stop coming for them. Dmitri nodded slowly. I'll start assembling the team. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. I handpicked the team myself. Dmitri, the assassin, Miles, and 3 others who'd proven their loyalty in the worst possible circumstances. We ran through the plan a dozen times, refining every detail until it was as close to perfect as it could be. The contact, a woman named Rosa, provided us with blueprints of the estate, the security rotations, and the layout of the main hall where the summit would take place. She also gave us a way in, a service entrance that was used for deliveries, which was only lightly guarded. The night before the operation, I made my way to the safe house where Sophia and Maria were staying. It was a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, protected by a rotating team of guards. Maria opened the door, her face lighting up with surprise. Victor, what are you doing here? I wanted to see you. Both of you. I stepped inside, looking around the modest space. It was clean and comfortable, but it wasn't home. How are you settling in? We're fine, Maria said, though I could see the worry in her eyes. Sophia misses you. She asks about you every day. I nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. I'm sorry I haven't been around more. Things have been complicated. Don't apologize. We know what you do. We know the risks. She paused, studying my face. There's something else. Isn't there something you're not telling me? I hesitated. I'm going to Napa Valley tomorrow. There's a meeting I need to attend. It's dangerous. Maria's face went pale. How dangerous, very. But I have to do it. If I don't, the people who want to hurt us will keep coming. This is the only way to end it. She was silent for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and took my hands in hers. You come back. You hear me, you come back to Sophia. She needs you. I need you. I squeezed her hands. I'll come back. I promise. Sophia was already asleep when I peeked into her room. She was curled up in her bed, her small face peaceful in the moonlight. I stood there for a long moment, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I left before sunrise, slipping out of the apartment like a ghost. Maria was waiting by the door, her eyes red-rimmed, but her expression fierce. Be careful, she said, always. The flight to California was tense, the team silent, as we reviewed the plan one final time. We touched down at a private airstrip outside of San Francisco, where a local contact was waiting with vehicles and equipment. The estate was a sprawling property in the hills, surrounded by vineyards that stretched for miles. It was beautiful, in a haunting way, the kind of place where people gathered to make deals that destroyed lives. We approached from the east, using the vineyards for cover. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the landscape. Rosa had provided us with uniforms that matched the catering staff, and we moved through the service entrance without incident. The estate's main building was a sprawling mansion, its architecture a blend of Spanish colonial and modern luxury. The summit was being held in the grand ballroom, a massive space with vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows. We made our way to the kitchen, where Rosa was waiting. She was a small woman, nervous but determined. Security is tighter than I expected, she said. They've got extra men patrolling the interior. And there's a separate security detail for the main event, people I don't recognize. Any idea who they are? Not local, she said. I think they're brought in from outside. Professionals. This was a complication I hadn't anticipated. If the cartel had brought in outside security, they were expecting trouble. The question was whether they knew we were coming or if this was standard protocol. We'll adapt, I said. What's the layout of the ballroom? Rosa pulled out a diagram, showing the positions of the tables, the stage, and the exits. The main event starts at 9. The cartel's leadership will be on the stage, with the other attendees seated below. Security will be positioned around the perimeter. I studied the diagram, memorizing every detail. We'll split into 2 teams. Team 1 will secure the exits, making sure no one leaves. Team 2 will take the stage. We hit them simultaneously, before they have a chance to react. And the security, neutralized. Quietly, if possible. If not, we do what we have to do. The hours passed slowly, the tension building with each minute. I checked my equipment a dozen times, my mind running through every possible scenario. At 8:45 p.m., we moved into position. Team 1, Dimitri and 2 others, took the eastern exits, their movements silent and precise. Team 2, myself, the assassin, and Miles, approached the ballroom from the south, using the service corridors to avoid detection. The ballroom was already filling with guests, the air thick with the murmur of conversation and the clink of glasses. The cartel's leadership was on the stage, their faces smug with self-satisfaction. I signaled the team to hold, waiting for the right moment. The summit was scheduled to begin with a speech from the cartel's leader, a man named Chun. I wanted him on stage, exposed, before we made our move. At 9 p.m., Chun stepped up to the podium, his voice carrying through the room. Welcome, friends, he began. Tonight, we gather to discuss a common threat. A man who has cost us millions, who has disrupted our operations, and who has murdered our people. Victor Marchetti. I smiled in the darkness, savoring the irony. Marchetti thinks he can destroy us, Chun continued. He thinks his attacks on our infrastructure will weaken our resolve. But he's wrong. Tonight, we're going to coordinate our response. We're going to. I stepped into the room, my beretta raised. You're going to do nothing. The room erupted into chaos. Guests screamed, security scrambled for their weapons. But my team was already in motion, taking down the perimeter guards with suppressed shots. I walked toward the stage, my eyes locked on Chun. He was frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. Victor Marchetti, he said, his voice trembling. How did you? I'm the thunderstorm, I said. And I'm here to make sure you understand the cost of threatening what's mine. I raised my beretta and fired. The bullet struck Chun square in the chest, and he crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut. The sound of the shot was swallowed by the chaos, screaming guests, the clatter of overturned chairs, the desperate shouts of security scrambling to respond. I was already moving, my Beretta tracking the nearest threat. A security guard appeared from behind a pillar, his weapon raised. I put 2 rounds in his center mass before he could fire. Another came from the left, and the assassin took him down with a clean headshot. Miles was at the stage, his knife flashing as he neutralized 2 more guards who'd been positioned behind the podium. The ballroom descended into pandemonium. The cartel's leadership had been decapitated, Chun was dead, and my team was methodically eliminating anyone who tried to organize a defense. But the room was full of armed men, and they weren't going down without a fight. I dove behind an overturned table as a hail of gunfire tore through the space where I'd been standing. The wood splintered, and I could feel the heat of the rounds passing inches from my face. I returned fire, taking down 2 more guards before my magazine ran dry. "Cover me," I shouted, slapping a fresh magazine into my Beretta. Dimitri's team had secured the eastern exits, but the western exits were still open. I saw a group of cartel operatives trying to escape through a side door, and I signaled Miles to intercept. He moved with the grace of a dancer, his knife and silenced pistol working in deadly harmony. The assassin was in her element, moving through the chaos like a wraith. She took down 3 more guards with surgical precision, her silenced rounds barely audible above the screaming. I scanned the room, assessing the situation. Most of the leadership was dead or dying. The remaining guards were disorganized, their morale crumbling. But I couldn't afford to leave any survivors, not if I wanted to send a clean message. "Anyone who drops their weapon lives," I shouted, my voice cutting through the noise. "Anyone who doesn't dies." A handful of guards complied, throwing their weapons to the ground and raising their hands. The rest made a final desperate stand, and we cut them down without mercy. Within 5 minutes, it was over. The ballroom was a charnel house, the floor slick with blood and littered with bodies. The surviving guests, mostly financiers and representatives from other organizations, were huddled in corners, their faces masks of terror. I walked to the stage, stepping over Chen's body. The man who had been the cartel's leader was now just another corpse, his eyes staring sightlessly at the vaulted ceiling. "Listen up," I said, addressing the survivors. "You're going to spread the word. Tell everyone who'll listen that Victor Marchetti doesn't negotiate. He doesn't compromise. He destroys anyone who threatens what's his." A woman in a designer dress started to weep, her mascara running down her face. I ignored her. "Let me be clear," I continued. "The cartel is finished on the East Coast. Their leadership is dead, their infrastructure is in ruins, and anyone who tries to fill the vacuum will meet the same fate. If you're smart, you'll stay out of my way. If you're not," I gestured at the bodies, "you'll end up like them." I signaled my team to pull back. We'd done what we came here to do, and the longer we stayed, the greater the risk of reinforcements arriving. We moved through the service corridors, our footsteps muffled by the carpet. Rosa was waiting by the service entrance. Her face paled. "Are you all right?" I asked. "I'm fine," she said, though her hands were shaking. "I did what you asked. Is it over?" "It's over for now, but I need you to get out of here. Go somewhere safe and stay there until I contact you." She nodded. Disappearing into the night, we made our way to the extraction point, a clearing in the vineyards where a helicopter was waiting. The rotors were already spinning, the pilot anxious to leave. I was the last aboard, taking one final look at the estate. The lights of the mansion glittered in the distance, a beacon of death and destruction. "Let's go," I said, settling into my seat. The helicopter lifted off, banking toward the coast. I watched the estate shrink in the distance, feeling a cold satisfaction. The cartel's leadership was gone. Their network was in disarray. It would take months for them to regroup, if they ever did. But I knew this wasn't the end. There were other players, other threats. The underworld was a hydra, and cutting off one had only made 2 more grow in its place. The flight back to New York was silent, the team exhausted but satisfied. Dimitri was nursing a wound on his arm, a graze from a stray bullet, but he waved off my concern. "I've had worse," he said with a grim smile. The assassin was already asleep, her head against the window. Miles was studying the blueprints of the estate, his mind still working on the tactical details. I sat alone, staring out at the darkness. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a familiar emptiness. I'd done what I'd set out to do. I'd protected my people. But at what cost? We landed at a private airstrip outside the city, where a fleet of SUVs was waiting. I dismissed the team, telling them to rest and recover. They'd earned it that I drove to the safe house, my mind racing. Maria would be awake. She always was when I was on a mission. Sophia would be asleep, her small face peaceful and trusting. I pulled up to the apartment building, parking in the underground garage. The guards at the entrance recognized me and stepped aside. That the elevator ride was interminable, the seconds stretching into hours. When I finally reached the door, I hesitated. The man who walked through that door wasn't the same man who'd left. He was harder, darker, more dangerous. Maria opened the door before I could knock, her face a mixture of relief and anxiety. "Victor, you're back," I said I would be. She pulled me into a hug, her embrace warm and reassuring. For a moment, I let myself feel it. The comfort of human connection, the reminder that I had something worth fighting for. "Is it over?" she asked, pulling back to look at me. "For now," I said. "But there's more work to be done." She nodded, understanding. "Sophia's asleep. She's been asking about you." I walked to Sophia's room, peering through the crack in the door. She was curled up in her bed, her small hand clutching a stuffed rabbit that I'd given her. I stood there for a long moment, watching her sleep. This was what I was fighting for. This was what I'd risked everything to protect. That I closed the door and walked back to the living room, where Maria was waiting with 2 cups of coffee. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the couch. "You look like you need it." I sat, accepting the coffee. It was strong and black, just the way I liked it. "Tell me," she said. "What happened?" I told her everything. The operation, the summit, the aftermath. I didn't spare the details, didn't try to make myself sound heroic. She deserved to know the truth. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "You did what you had to do," she said finally. "That's what matters. Is it I killed a lot of people tonight. Most of them were just following orders. They had families, people who loved them. The same way they were going to kill my family," Maria said, her voice fierce. "They were going to kill my parents, my brothers, my nieces and nephews. They were going to use them to get to you. You stopped that. You saved them. I know. But that doesn't make it easier." "Of course it doesn't. If it was easy, you wouldn't be the man you are." I looked at her, studying her face. She was strong, resilient, unbroken by the horrors she'd witnessed. "When this is over," I said, "I'm going to get you and Sophia out of this life. You deserve better than this." "I don't want better," she said. "I want you. I want Sophia to grow up knowing that there's someone who'll always protect her. That's enough for me." I felt a lump form in my throat. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "But you're stuck with me anyway." We sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the night slowly lifting. It was strange, feeling this way, human, vulnerable. I'd spent so long building walls around myself that I'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. But with Maria, the walls came down. She saw me for who I really was, and she didn't flinch. That the next few days were quiet, a brief respite from the chaos. I spent time with Sophia, reading her stories and playing games. She was growing so fast, her small face changing as she matured. "You're different," Sophia said one afternoon, as we were drawing pictures together. "Different how?" "Calmer," she said. "Like the storm is over." I smiled. "Maybe it is." She giggled, pressing a crayon into my hand. "Let's draw a rainbow." The war with the cartel was far from over, but in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was this: the small moments of peace, the fleeting glimpses of a life I'd never thought I'd have. But even as I drew rainbows and played games, I knew the respite wouldn't last. The cartel would rebuild. New enemies would arise. The underworld was a constant cycle of violence and retribution, and I was trapped in its grip. The question was whether I could find a way out, whether I could protect what mattered most without losing myself in the process. That I thought about my mother, her portrait still watching over me from the estate. She'd always believed I could be more than the monster I'd become. Maybe she was right. Maybe there was still hope for me, yet that the storm had passed. But the thunder was still rumbling in the distance. And I knew it wouldn't be long before it returned. That the calm lasted exactly 12 days. On the 13th morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing with an urgency that made my blood run cold. Dimitri's voice was tight, controlled, the voice of a man delivering news he knew would change everything. "Boss, we've got a situation." The cartel's leadership in California is dead, but their allies in Mexico are mobilizing. They're not waiting to rebuild. They're coming straight for us. I was out of bed before he finished the sentence, my mind already racing through the implications. How many when? We're still gathering intel, but initial reports suggest a coordinated assault on multiple fronts. They're targeting our shipping operations, our financial centers, and our safe houses. They've already hit 2 of our facilities in New Jersey. Casualties, 3 dead, 7 wounded. They caught us off guard. I felt a cold fury building in my chest. The cartel's allies were testing me, probing my defenses for weaknesses. And they'd found one. I want everyone on high alert, I said. Increase security at all facilities. I'm coming in. The drive to the war room was a blur, my mind consumed with strategy. The cartel's allies were a new variable, one I hadn't fully anticipated. The Mexican organizations had been content to stay out of the conflict, but the death of Chun and his inner circle had changed the calculus. They saw an opportunity to expand their influence, and they were taking it. The war room was already buzzing with activity when I arrived. Dmitri was coordinating the response, his voice calm and authoritative. Miles was at a computer, analyzing satellite imagery. The assassin was sharpening her knives, her face a mask of cold focus. Update, I said, taking my place at the head of the table. We've identified 3 major threat vectors, Dmitri began. First, the shipping ports. They've got operatives in place at the Brooklyn and Newark terminals, ready to disrupt our operations. Second, our financial centers. They're planning a coordinated cyber attack on our banking infrastructure. And third, the safe houses. They've been tracking our assets, and they know the locations of several key properties. How did they get that information? We're still investigating, but we suspect a leak in our internal communications. We're sweeping for bugs and monitoring all outgoing traffic. I nodded, absorbing the information. What about Sophia and Maria? They're secure. I've doubled the guard at their location, and we've got a secondary safe house ready in case we need to move them. Good. Now, let's talk about our response. The next few hours were spent developing a counter-strategy. We'd hit the cartel's allies before they could hit us, using the same tactics that had worked against Chin's organization. Surgical strikes, coordinated assaults, and a healthy dose of psychological warfare. But as we refined the plan, a nagging doubt crept into my mind. The cartel's allies were different from Chin's organization. They were more disciplined, more experienced, and they had deeper resources. This wouldn't be a quick victory. This would be a grinding war of attrition. The first strike will be against their operational hub in Tijuana, I said, pointing to a location on the map. It's their primary command center for the West Coast operations. If we take it out, we'll disrupt their ability to coordinate attacks. That's a high-risk target, Miles said. The compound is heavily fortified, and they've got advanced surveillance systems. We'd need a significant force to breach it. Then we give them a significant force. I want every available asset on this operation. We're not just hitting them, we're annihilating them. The team nodded, their faces grim. They knew what I was asking. This wasn't just a tactical strike. This was a declaration of war. The operation was set for 48 hours later. I spent the intervening time making preparations, ensuring that every detail was accounted for. The intelligence on the Tijuana compound was extensive, gathered from multiple sources over the years. I knew the layout, the security rotations, and the weaknesses. But I also knew that no plan survived contact with the enemy. There would be variables I couldn't anticipate, challenges I couldn't predict. The only certainty was that people would die. The night before the operation, I made my way to the safe house one last time. Sophia was awake when I arrived, her face lighting up with joy as I walked through the door. "Tio Victor," she shouted, running toward me. "You came back." "Of course I came back, Pequeña. I told you I would." Maria was standing in the doorway, her face a mixture of love and worry. She knew what was coming. She'd been through this before. "You're leaving again," she said. "It wasn't a question. Tomorrow. There's something I need to take care of." "I know. She hesitated, her voice trailing off. I crossed the room and took her hands in mine. "I'll come back. I always do." "I know. But that doesn't make it easier." We sat together in the living room, Sophia curled up between us, her small body warm and trusting. It was a moment of peace, a brief respite from the chaos that awaited me. But even as I savored the warmth, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. A nagging sense of unease, a whisper in the back of my mind that refused to be silenced. I'm going to check the perimeter, I said, rising to my feet. Victor, everything is secure. Dimitri's men are outside. I know, but I need to see for myself. The apartment building was quiet, the hallway empty. I made my way to the stairwell, my hand resting on the grip of my Beretta. The guards were at their posts, alert and focused. I walked the perimeter of the building, checking every entrance and exit. Everything was secure, just as Maria had said. But the unease remained, a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. I was about to return to the apartment when my phone buzzed. It was Dimitri. Boss, we've got a problem. The cartel's allies are moving faster than we anticipated. They've already hit 2 more of our facilities. We're losing ground. Where are they hitting? The financial centers. They've launched a coordinated cyber attack that's crippling our banking infrastructure. We're losing millions by the hour. I felt the cold fury return. I'm on my way. Hold the line until I get there. I hesitated at the door of the apartment. Sophia was still awake, her eyes wide and trusting. Maria was watching me, her face pale. Go, she said softly. Do what you have to do. We'll be here when you get back. I nodded, my throat tight. I'll be back. I promise. The drive to the war room was a blur of rage and frustration. The cartel's allies were hitting me where it hurt, my financial infrastructure. They knew that I couldn't sustain a prolonged war without resources. The cyber attack was sophisticated, the kind of operation that required months of planning. Miles was already working on a countermeasure, his face illuminated by the glow of multiple monitors. We've identified the source of the attack, he said. It's a server farm in Mexico City. They've got a team of hackers working around the clock, and they're systematically draining our accounts. Can you stop them? Not directly. But I can redirect their attack, send them down a blind alley while we move our assets to secure locations. Do it. And I want a team ready to hit that server farm within 24 hours. Boss, that's a high-risk operation. The server farm is in a heavily populated area, and the security is top-notch. I don't care. If they're going to play dirty, I'm going to play dirtier. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. I directed the counterattack from the war room, my voice hoarse from hours of coordination. The cyber attack was eventually neutralized, but the damage was done. I'd lost millions, and my organization was on the back foot. But the real battle was still to come. The Tijuana operation was set for midnight, and I was determined to see it through. I arrived at the staging area with hours to spare. The team was assembled, their faces grim and focused. They were the best I had, and they knew the stakes. Listen up, I said, addressing the assembled operatives. Tonight, we hit the cartel's allies where it hurts. We're going to take out their command center and send a message that we're not going to back down. This is going to be dangerous, and some of you might not come back. But I need you to know that what we're doing is important. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for our families, our people, and our future. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Let's move out. The drive to the compound was tense, the convoy of vehicles moving through the darkness like a single, coordinated organism. I was in the lead vehicle, my eyes scanning the road ahead. The compound was a sprawling complex of buildings, surrounded by high walls and barbed wire. The guards at the gate were taken out silently, their bodies dragged into the shadows. That we moved through the compound like ghosts, our footsteps silent and our weapons ready. The resistance was fierce, but we were prepared. We cut through the cartel's allies with ruthless efficiency, every shot deliberate and deadly. I found the command center in the main building, a room filled with monitors and maps. The cartel's leader was there, a man named Romero who'd been a key figure in the organization. Victor Marchetti, he said, his voice cold. You're more persistent than I expected. And you're more foolish than I thought, I replied. Did you really think you could come after me and get away with it? Power shifts, Marchetti. The old ways are dying. You're dying with them. We'll see. I raised my Beretta and fired. The compound was in ruins by the time we left, the bodies of the cartel's allies littering the ground. It was a victory, but it came at a cost. I'd lost 3 of my own men, and my organization was stretched thin. I stared at the burning compound, feeling the weight of the war pressing down on me. This was the cost of power. This was the price of being the thunderstorm. And I knew that even if we won this war, the next one was already waiting. That the fires of Tijuana were still burning when I received the news that would change everything. I was in the back of a black SUV, nursing a wound on my shoulder, a graze from a stray bullet that had found its mark during the assault. The pain was dull, manageable, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest when Dimitri's voice crackled through the encrypted line. "Boss, we've got a major problem. I don't know how to tell you this. Just say it. The safe house. It's been compromised. They hit it 20 minutes ago." The world stopped. The sound of the engine, the hum of the tires on the asphalt, the distant wail of sirens. All of it faded into a deafening silence. "Maria, Sophia, we don't know yet. We're still trying to get confirmation. But the reports from the scene are bad, boss. Real bad. Turn the car around," I said, my voice a cold whisper. "Now." The driver didn't hesitate, executing a sharp U-turn that sent the SUV screeching across the road. I was already on the phone, barking orders at anyone who would listen. I needed eyes on the safe house. I needed to know what had happened. I needed to know if they were alive. The drive felt like an eternity. Every second stretched into an hour, every mile into a lifetime. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. I thought about Sophia's small hand in mine, her laughter echoing through the halls. I thought about Maria's fierce loyalty, her unwavering courage. I thought about the family I'd never had, the warmth I'd only just begun to discover, and I thought about the man who had taken them from me. The safe house was a wreck when I arrived. The building was still smoldering, the walls blackened with soot and the windows shattered. Emergency vehicles were everywhere, police cars, ambulances, fire trucks. Their lights cast a sickly glow across the scene. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring the shouts of the officers who tried to stop me. Dimitri was already there, his face a mask of grief. "Boss, I'm so sorry. We did everything we could." Where are they?" I demanded. "Where are Maria and Sophia?" Dimitri hesitated, his eyes avoiding mine. "We found Maria in the stairwell. She was trying to protect Sophia. She took 3 rounds to the chest. She didn't make it." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my knees buckle, and Dimitri caught me before I could fall. "And Sophia?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We don't know. She's not among the dead. We think they took her. We think they're using her as leverage." The rage that flooded through me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It was cold, crystalline, absolute. It consumed everything. The grief, the fear, the guilt. All that was left was a burning need for revenge. "Who did this?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "We're still investigating, but we have a lead. A man named Ricardo Vasquez. He's one of Romero's lieutenants. He escaped the Tijuana raid, and we think he's been coordinating the counterattacks. Find him. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what it costs. Find him and bring him to me." Dimitri nodded. "We're already working on it. We've got assets tracking his movements, and we're confident we'll have a location within the next few hours." "Good. In the meantime, I want every available asset on this. We're going to tear this city apart until we find him." The next few hours were a blur of activity. I coordinated the search from a command center set up in a nearby hotel, my voice hoarse from barking orders. The team worked tirelessly, following every lead, every whisper, every rumor. But Vasquez was a ghost, slipping through our fingers at every turn. It was clear he had help. Powerful allies who were protecting him, shielding him from our reach. "You should get some rest," Dimitri said, his voice weary. "You've been going nonstop for 2 days. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." "I'll rest when I find her," I said. "Not before." The 3rd day, we got our first real break. One of our assets, a low-level informant who'd been feeding us information for months, reported that Vasquez had been seen at a private estate in the Hamptons. The property belonged to a shell company, but we traced it back to a cartel front. I was in the command center when the news came in. I stared at the screen, studying the satellite imagery of the estate. It was a sprawling property, surrounded by high walls and dense foliage. Perfect for hiding a hostage. "How many men?" I asked. "At least 20. Maybe more. The security is heavy, but we can breach it if we move quickly and quietly." "Do it. I want a team ready to move within the hour. And I want to lead it." "Boss, are you sure your shoulder?" "I'll be fine." The hour passed like a lifetime. I checked my equipment a dozen times, my mind focused on the mission. The team was assembled: Dimitri, the assassin, Miles, and 8 others. They were the best I had, and they knew the stakes. "Listen up," I said, addressing the assembled operatives. We're going to hit this estate hard and fast. Our primary objective is the retrieval of Sophia. Secondary objective is the elimination of Vasquez. I want him alive if possible, dead if necessary. But Sophia comes first. Understood. A chorus of affirmations echoed through the room. Let's move out. The drive to the Hamptons was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I stared out the window, watching the city give way to the suburbs, then to the rolling hills of the East End. The estate was a fortress, but we were prepared. The assault team split into 3 groups, each approaching from a different direction. I led the main assault, moving through the darkness like a predator. The first guards were taken out silently, their bodies dragged into the shadows. We moved through the estate with deadly precision, clearing rooms and corridors as we went. I found Vasquez in the main building, a grand manor with vaulted ceilings and marble floors. He was in the study, surrounded by his lieutenants, their faces masks of arrogance. "Marchetti," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Where is she?" I demanded. "Where is Sophia?" "She's safe. For now. But that could change, depending on how you behave." I felt the rage building, but I forced it down. I couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. Not when Sophia's life was on the line. "What do you want?" "Simple. I want you to disappear. I want you to take your organization and leave the East Coast. If you do, I'll let the girl go. If not," he gestured to one of his men, who was holding a phone, "I'll make sure you never see her again." I studied him, weighing the options. He was bluffing. He had to be. Sophia was his only leverage. Without her, he was dead, but I couldn't take that risk. Not with her life on the line. "I need to see her first," I said. "I need to know she's alive." Vasquez hesitated, then nodded. He made a call, and a few moments later, a door opened at the back of the study. Sophia was let in, her small face pale and tear-streaked. She was holding her stuffed rabbit, clutching it like a lifeline. "Tio Victor," she cried, struggling against the man holding her. "Let her go," I said, my voice ice. "Let her go right now. Not until you agree to my terms." "I agree. I'll do whatever you want. Just let her go." Vasquez smiled, a cold, cruel smile. "That's what I thought. But I'm afraid it's not that simple. You see, I don't trust you, Marchetti. You're a liar and a killer. So I'm going to make you an offer." "What kind of offer?" "You're going to leave the East Coast. You're going to take your organization and go somewhere far away. And you're going to leave the girl with me. As insurance." I felt the rage boiling over. "That's not going to happen." "Then I'll kill her." The moment stretched, the tension unbearable. I was out of options. The team was in position, but I couldn't risk a firefight. Not with Sophia in the room. Then I saw it. A flicker of movement behind Vasquez. The assassin, moving like a shadow, her knife already in her hand. I had one chance. One shot. I lunged forward, grabbing Sophia and pulling her behind me. At the same moment, the assassin struck, her knife finding Vasquez's throat. The room erupted into chaos. Gunfire, screaming, the chaos of battle. I kept Sophia behind me, using my body as a shield as I returned fire. Vasquez's men went down one by one, their numbers no match for my team's precision. Within minutes, it was over. The study was a charnel house, the bodies of the cartel's allies littering the floor. I turned to Sophia, checking her for injuries. She was crying, her small body shaking with sobs. "It's okay, Pequeña," I said, pulling her into my arms. "I'm here. I've got you. You're safe now." "I was so scared," she sobbed. "I thought I was never going to see you again." "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "I'm never going to let anyone hurt you again." The extraction was quick, the team moving through the estate with practiced efficiency. Sophia never left my side, her small hand clutching mine. We made it back to the command center as dawn was breaking. I carried Sophia inside, laying her down on a couch and covering her with a blanket. She was exhausted, her eyes already closing. "I'll be right here," I said, stroking her hair. "I'm not going anywhere." She was asleep within minutes, her small face peaceful. I watched her for a long moment, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me. She was safe. That was all that mattered. Dimitri appeared at my side, his face grim. "Boss, we've got a situation. We found something in Vasquez's study. Something you need to see." "What is it?" "He had information about your mother's death. It wasn't just Marco. He was working with someone else. Someone closer to you." I felt the cold fury return. Who? We're still trying to confirm, but we think it's the senator. Catherine's father. He was the one who ordered the hit. He wanted to weaken you, make you vulnerable so he could control the political landscape. I nodded, the pieces falling into place. Find me everything you can on him. I want to know his secrets, his weaknesses, his enemies. And then I'm going to destroy him. Dmitri nodded, already making calls that I turned back to Sophia, watching her sleep. The war with the cartel wasn't over. There were still enemies to face, scores to settle. But for now, this was enough that the thunderstorm would protect his own. No matter the cost, the information Dmitri uncovered was a cancer, spreading through every corner of my life. Senator Edward Sterling had been playing a long game, one that stretched back years before Catherine ever entered my orbit. He'd orchestrated my mother's death not for money or power, but for something far more insidious: control. I sat in the war room, staring at the files spread across the table. Sterling's rise to power was a masterclass in manipulation. He'd started as a junior congressman, building his career on a platform of tough-on-crime rhetoric, while simultaneously cultivating relationships with the very criminals he claimed to oppose. My mother had been a loose end, a witness to a meeting she should never have seen. Sterling had ordered her death to protect his secrets, and Marco had been his willing pawn. Miles, I want everything on Sterling, I said, my voice flat. His finances, his connections, his weaknesses. I want to know every skeleton in his closet, every deal he's ever made, every person he's ever betrayed. Miles nodded, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. I've got a team working on it. We've already found some interesting discrepancies in his campaign financing. Shell companies, offshore accounts, the works. Good. Keep digging. The next few days were consumed by the investigation. I barely slept, my mind consumed with the details of Sterling's corruption. He was a master of deception, hiding his crimes behind a carefully constructed facade of respectability. But I had resources he didn't know about. I had access to information that would destroy him. The first breakthrough came when Miles uncovered a connection between Sterling and a Russian oligarch named Petrov. The two had been partners in a series of illicit deals, funneling money through a web of shell companies and offshore accounts. Petrov was a known criminal, and his association with Sterling would be enough to destroy the senator's career. We've got him, Miles said, a rare smile on his face. Sterling's been laundering money through a holding company in the Caymans. Petrov is the primary investor, but Sterling's fingerprints are all over it. Can we prove it? Absolutely. I've got documents, wire transfers, and witness testimony. This is the smoking gun. I nodded, feeling a cold satisfaction. Good. Let's start planning our attack. The strategy was simple but devastating. I would release the information to the media, using a network of journalists I'd cultivated over the years. The story would be timed to coincide with Sterling's re-election campaign, ensuring maximum damage. But I wanted more than just his career. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to know the pain of losing everything, just as he'd made me suffer. The night before the story was set to break, I received an unexpected visitor. Catherine Sterling appeared at my private residence, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. "Victor, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I need to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice cold. "Your father is a murderer. He killed my mother. He's going to pay for what he did. I know what he did. I know everything. And I'm not here to defend him. I'm here to help you." I studied her for a long moment. She was telling the truth. I could see it in her eyes. But trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. "Help me how?" "Petrov is planning to kill my father. He's been threatening him for months, trying to gain control of his operations. My father is terrified, but he's too proud to ask for help. I'm asking on his behalf. The irony is almost overwhelming. Your father killed my mother, and now you're asking me to save him. I'm not asking you to save him. I'm asking you to use this situation to your advantage. Petrov is a threat to both of us. If you help me, I'll give you everything you need to destroy him." I considered her offer. Petrov was a dangerous adversary, one I'd been planning to deal with eventually. If Catherine could provide me with access to his inner circle, it would be a significant advantage. "All right," I said finally. "I'll help you. But you're going to do exactly what I say when I say it. And if I find out you've been playing me, I'll make sure you regret it." She nodded, her face pale but determined. I understand. The next few weeks were a delicate dance of deception and manipulation. Catherine fed me information about her father's operations, while I used that information to dismantle Petrov's network. The attack on Sterling's reputation came first, a coordinated media blitz that exposed his corruption and criminal associations. The story went viral, dominating headlines and news cycles. Sterling's approval ratings plummeted, and his re-election campaign was in shambles. But the real blow came when I delivered the evidence to the FBI. Sterling was arrested at his home, charged with conspiracy and money laundering. The news was a bombshell, and the political establishment was thrown into chaos. I sat in my office, watching the coverage on the news. Sterling's face was a mask of disbelief as he was led away in handcuffs. It was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. I still wanted him to know who was responsible. The next day, I visited him in prison. He was in a holding cell, his face haggard and defeated. "Victor Marchetti," he said, his voice hollow. "I should have known. You should have known better than to cross me," I said. "Your daughter tried to warn you. She begged you to stop, but you wouldn't listen. Where is Catherine? Is she safe? She's safer than she's ever been. She's been helping me dismantle your network. She chose the right side, Sterling. I'll make sure she's protected." Sterling's face contorted with rage. "You're a monster. You've destroyed everything I've built." "You destroyed yourself," I said. "You killed my mother. You tried to destroy my organization. You used your own daughter as a pawn in your schemes. Everything that's happened to you is exactly what you deserve." I turned and walked away, leaving him alone with his rage and despair. The victory was sweet, but it came at a cost. The war with the cartel had taken its toll, and I was exhausted in ways I hadn't anticipated. The constant violence, the endless betrayals, the weight of the decisions I had to make, it was all starting to wear me down. I made my way to the safe house, where Sophia was waiting. She'd been staying with a trusted guardian, a woman who'd been with my organization for years. When I walked in, Sophia ran to me, her small arms wrapping around my legs. "Tio Victor, you came back." "Of course I came back. I told you I would." She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Is it over the bad men?" "It's over for now, Pequeña. But there will always be bad men. The important thing is that we're strong enough to stop them." She nodded, her face serious. "I'm going to be strong like you. I'm going to help people." I knelt down, meeting her eyes. "You're already strong. You're the strongest person I know." She smiled, her face lighting up with joy. "Really, really." The evening was quiet, a rare moment of peace. I spent it with Sophia, reading her stories and playing games. It was a glimpse of the life I'd never thought I'd have, a life of warmth and connection, of love and laughter. But even as I savored the moment, I knew it couldn't last. The underworld was a constant cycle of violence and retribution, and I was trapped in its grip. The question was whether I could find a way out, whether I could protect what mattered most without losing myself in the process. As the sun set over the city, I made a decision. I would end the war with the cartel, once and for all. I would dismantle their organization and ensure that they could never threaten anyone I cared about again. And then I would walk away. I would leave this life behind and start anew. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be people who would try to stop me. But for Sophia, for Maria's memory, I would do whatever it took. The thunderstorm would protect his own, and then he would find his peace. The decision to walk away was the hardest I'd ever made. Not because I doubted it, but because I knew the cost. The underworld didn't let go easily. It had a way of pulling you back in, dragging you down until you drowned in the blood you'd spilled. But for Sophia, for the memory of Maria, I had to try. I called Dmitri to my office the next morning. He came in with his usual stoic expression, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He knew something was coming. "I'm ending it," I said without preamble. "The war, the empire, all of it. I'm walking away." Dmitri's face remained impassive, but I saw the flicker of surprise. "Boss, that's not something you can just do. There are people who depend on you. Enemies who'd love to see you gone." "I know, but I've made my peace with it. I've spent my whole life building this empire, and what has it gotten me? A trail of bodies and a heart full of regret. I don't want that anymore. I want something different." "And Sophia? What about her? Everything. She's the reason I'm doing this. I want her to have a life that isn't defined by violence and fear. I want her to grow up knowing that she's loved, that she's safe." Dmitri was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. "I understand, boss. I really do. But you can't just disappear. You need to make sure the organization is stable before you go. I've already thought about that. You're going to run things. You've been with me long enough to know how everything works, and you've got the loyalty of the men. The transition will be smooth. I'm honored, Dmitri said. But are you sure this is what you want? I've never been more sure of anything. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I transitioned control of the organization to Dmitri, ensuring that every operation was stable and every asset was accounted for. It was a delicate process, one that required careful negotiation and the occasional show of force, but gradually, the organization settled into its new leadership. Dmitri was competent and respected, and the men accepted him without complaint. With the organization secured, I turned my attention to the final piece of the puzzle, the cartel. They'd been weakened by our attacks, but they weren't destroyed. And as long as they existed, they'd be a threat to anyone I cared about. I assembled a team of my most trusted operatives, the assassin, Miles, and a handful of others. The plan was simple. Hit the cartel's remaining leadership in a series of coordinated strikes that would leave them crippled and disorganized. We're going to end this, I said, addressing the team. Once and for all, they'll never threaten anyone I care about again. The operation was brutal, bloody, and thorough. We struck at the cartel's strongholds in Mexico, their safe houses in the Southwest, and their financial centers in the Caribbean. Each attack was surgical, precise, and devastating. Within a month, the cartel's leadership was decimated. Their infrastructure was in ruins, their resources depleted. They were no longer a threat. The night the last attack was completed, I stood on a rooftop in Mexico City, staring out at the skyline. The city was beautiful, its lights twinkling in the darkness like 1,000 stars. But all I could see was the blood I'd spilled. I was finally freed. The next day, I flew back to New York. The city was the same as I'd left it. Bustling, chaotic, indifferent to the struggles of the men who fought for control of its shadows. But I felt different. Lighter. As if a weight I'd been carrying my whole life had been lifted. I made my way to the safe house, where Sophia was waiting. She ran to me as soon as I walked through the door, her small arms wrapping around my legs. Tio Victor. You came back. I told you I would, Pequeña. I always come back. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and trusting. Are you done fighting? Can we go home now? The word home hit me like a physical blow. Home. It was something I'd never really had, a concept I'd never fully understood. But with Sophia, it was different. She made me want to believe in the possibility of a life beyond the violence. Yes, I said, kneeling to meet her eyes. We're going home. We're going to start a new life, together, somewhere far away from all of this. Promise, I promise. The next few weeks were spent making preparations. I liquidated my assets, transferred control of the organization to Dmitri, and arranged for a new identity. It was a complicated process, but I'd been planning for this moment for months. Sophia, of course, was my first priority. I'd arranged for her to have a new identity, a new life, and a new future. She would never know the horrors I'd experienced. She would never have to carry the burden of violence and death. We left New York on a cold winter morning, the city disappearing into the mist behind us. I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me there. Our new home was a small village on the coast of Spain. It was a quiet place, far removed from the chaos of the underworld. The people were friendly, the beaches were beautiful, and the pace of life was slow and peaceful. I bought a small house overlooking the sea, with a garden full of flowers and a terrace where Sophia could play. It was perfect. It was everything I'd never known I wanted. The first few months were an adjustment. I'd spent my whole life in a world of violence and manipulation, and the transition to a peaceful existence was jarring. But gradually, I found my rhythm. I woke with the sunrise, tended the garden, and spent my days exploring the village with Sophia, as she thrived in her new environment. She made friends at the local school, learned Spanish, and discovered a love of painting. Her laughter filled the house, a constant reminder of why I'd made the choice I had. One evening, as the sun set over the sea, I sat on the terrace with Sophia. She was painting, her small face focused as she worked on a portrait of Maria. What was my mother like? She asked, her voice soft. I'd been dreading this question. Maria's death was a wound that hadn't fully healed, a loss that still ached. But Sophia deserved to know the truth. Your mother was the bravest woman I ever knew, I said. She was fierce and loyal and loving. She would do anything to protect the people she loved. Like you. I smiled, a bittersweet warmth spreading through my chest. Yes, like me. Did she love you? I looked out at the sea, the waves crashing against the shore. I don't know, I admitted. But I loved her. I loved her more than I've ever loved anyone. Sophia nodded, her small face serious. I'm glad you told me. I want to remember her the way she really was. You will. I'll make sure of it. The years passed, and life settled into a comfortable rhythm. I watched Sophia grow, her childhood a blur of laughter and discovery. She became a young woman, strong and independent, with her mother's fierce spirit. The underworld faded into the past, a distant memory of a life I'd left behind. I never spoke of it, never looked back. But I never forgot. The lessons I'd learned, the lives I'd taken, the people I'd lost, they were all part of me, woven into the fabric of who I was that one evening. As I sat on the terrace watching the sunset, Sophia appeared beside me. She was grown now, a young woman with her mother's eyes and her own gentle strength. I've been thinking, she said, about what you've done for me, about the life you gave me. I didn't give you anything, I said. You gave me a reason to live. She smiled, a soft, knowing smile. I remember when I was little, I used to think you were a thunderstorm, a scary, powerful thing that could destroy anyone who got too close. But I was wrong. Wrong how? You're not a thunderstorm, she said. You're the calm after the storm. You're the peace that follows the chaos. You're the reason I believe that even in the darkest places, there's always hope. I felt a lump form in my throat. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. It's the truth, she said. You saved my life, Tio Victor. You gave me a second chance, and I'll never forget it. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. And I'll never forget you. You saved my life too, Sophia. You gave me a reason to change. You gave me hope. We sat in silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The sky was a canvas of orange and pink, the sea a shimmering mirror of light. For the first time in my life, I felt at peace. The thunderstorm had found his calm. The shadows of the past had finally receded, replaced by the warmth of the present. And as I looked at Sophia, I knew that everything I'd done, the violence, the betrayal, the blood, had been worth it, because it had led me here, to this moment, to this life that the story was over. The war was won, and in the end, the thunderstorm had found his redemption.